Welcome to the Happy Homeschooler Podcast, a digital support group for everyone interested in a learning lifestyle. I'm your host, Melody.
I'm your co-host, Holly.
Today we'd like to discuss learning styles and modalities, but before we get into our topic, what's new with you, Holly? How's your family?
Oh, we're doing all right. We've been going out to the playground a lot, and my son thinks he is a ninja.
I've seen his ninja moves.
So he's been running down alongside the trail where I walk and hiding behind trees and jumping out. And I just wonder what people might think about what he's doing. Ninja mask and...
Oh, in his mask.
Oh, yeah. He's
not too hot?
Apparently not. You know, when you're trying to achieve an effect, then you got to go all out for it, I think.
It's probably entertaining everybody out there.
You know, they seem to just let him go by without too much notice, which probably disappoints him.
No, he's a ninja.
Well, I know, but...
You can't see him.
No, you can't see him. Yeah, so we've just been trying to get to the park every evening because the morning has been too hot. Yesterday morning, I checked my weather app, and it was 83 degrees and 73% humidity, and I said just like, no thank you. I'll see you later outside. It's too hot.
Need a little breeze, absolutely.
What about you? What have you been doing?
Well, I don't know. A lot of different things. I can't pin it down to one thing. We've got some family members moving, and then another friend who just learned they need to move.
Oh, goodness.
And so a lot of, helping to store some things temporarily for this person and that person, and just a lot of things outside of the normal. Trying to keep the routine going, but there's so many things.
Yeah, what is normal anyway these days?
I don't know. I couldn't even tell you. We've been busy, but it's been so many different things I can't categorize it as what we've been doing.
Some days we're so busy that in the morning, the next day, I can't even remember what we had for dinner the night before.
That's really sad.
Or it's good. I don't know. Being busy is good. That's better than being bored.
Yeah, well, yes.
I think.
That's true. Having lots to do. Well, let's talk for a minute or two about learning styles and modalities. I think that people might be familiar with those terms, but we get them mixed up.
Oh, sure enough. Right. So, modalities, that's the way you like information?
The way you like information. The way you physically interact with it and take in information. Your mode,
right.
Of gathering information. And when I first started homeschooling, I knew about modalities from teacher training and teaching kindergarten, and that by itself was really helpful to pinpoint what each one of my children was needing as far as how are they best going to take in the information and remember it. I wanted them to retain information, and I had some, of course they were kindergarten age, so they were really active and very kinesthetic, but there were also some, I think the first...
So kinesthetic is a modality.
Kinesthetic is a modality. Okay. We have visual learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners.
Right.
And your visual learner needs to see it, and your auditory learner needs to hear it and talk about it. Oh my goodness. Hear and talk talk about it.
Right.
And then your kinesthetic or tactile learner needs to physically connect with it. And I have a big family, and so among all my children, we had good examples of all of these in different combinations.
Right, because I know that I'm primarily visual.
Me too.
But if I'm trying to learn something, I have to actually do it. Like, I'll tell people all the time, don't just show me. I won't remember. I've got to get my hands on it and do it. So I think I'm visual kinesthetic.
A combination.
Yeah.
I think most people are, but we are predominantly one or the other. Or predominantly, there's usually one. And I know that one time we were walking down the road, I think I might have mentioned this before, and where my daughter had to touch all the little knobs in the window seat, my son just looked over there and observed them. And so
interesting.
She's very, very hands-on, still needs to hold a picture to look at it, looking at the visual thing, but has to hold it to see it. But if you have visual learners, they're usually strong readers.
I was a very early reader.
They can see it, or read a description of something to understand it. That's plenty for those kiddos.
I like to read instructions. My husband just likes to open a box and start
just
jamming things together.
I always read them and look at the diagrams. I like to see a diagram and know how it fits together.
So those are the modalities. And then on top of that, you have your learning styles.
On top of that, you have your learning styles. And then on top of that, you have all the other things like birth order or
your love language.
Yes,
so it's like things. Layers of an onion, basically.
Layers of an onion.
Right.
Or those overlays like in the encyclopedia.
Oh, right, where you take and
the
keep
muscle
stuff
layer
so you have the whole
mm-hmm.
person. Yeah, that's a great analogy. I like that.
Look at all the things.
Yeah.
All the things you can use to figure out your child are going to help you.
Right.
But I would say if you have visual learners, you want to do things with they do benefit from maps and charts and flashcards, but not too many because you can get visual clutter.
Yes, I can get overwhelmed. And speaking of that, this is kind of an aside, but because this is a new homeschool year, a lot of people are setting up their learning spaces, and they're wanting to put up a lot of cute things, but less is more.
Less is more.
It gets too much and too overwhelming.
Then you tune those things out and don't see
no
them
matter
anymore.
what kind of learner you are, really.
Really.
Yeah.
But it's hard not to.
I know.
We put things up, but we learn not to put up so many things and to rotate the things that we put up there. And when we were finished with the unit, we would take that stuff down and put up the new stuff. So
sure.
Those make good reviews.
Uh-huh.
So for your auditory learner that needs to hear and talk about everything, that one was a little harder for me to figure out how to incorporate into my day, I suppose. How about you? Did you have any auditory learners?
Well, so my middle son was a delayed reader, and so he had to take in most of his information auditorily. In addition to that, we use the Charlotte Mason method of education, which is strong on narration. So I would read things aloud to him. He could hear it, and then he got a chance to talk about it by narrating it back to me. And it was a really good fit. And even now, as an adult, he listens to a lot of podcasts, and he listens to audiobooks. Which, as a visual learner, if you make me listen to a fiction audiobook, I will want to punch you. That's just frustrating because I can't follow. My brain has to see the words and build the images in my head. But yeah, so my auditory learners, they did really well with read alouds and then narrating.
Absolutely. And those are the children that can sing a jingle back to you. So we used a lot of learning songs and rhymes.
And they hear things. My husband's auditory. He can hear a song and know the lyrics. And everything, and I don't know the name. I don't know what song is being sung until I get to the chorus. Then I'll say, "Oh, I know what that is." It's like a game. I know what it is, because I'm not auditory. So
I'm not much of an auditory learner. There's an element there, but I just learned to pull in a lot of like sing and learn kind of things, audio memory.
Use sing, spell, read, and write for my son who was the delayed reader, and that changed his whole world.
It makes everything easier to grasp. So that if you have an auditory learner, definitely pull in some of those songs and even making rhymes and making up jingles as mnemonics to remember things.
Right.
Really
I taught
helpful.
my kids to remember our phone number by singing it to I think it was like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, that tune. So it was like 4418041 or something like that. Now my song is nearly done. That's not that rhyme, but that's how I taught them to remember some things. And then there were skip counting songs that go with Matthew C.
Yeah.
So those kind of things. Yes, those are very helpful for auditory learners.
We had one suggestion in our curriculum was to put a passage of scripture to a song, and that was so effective. Different members of my family can still sing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then if you have a hands-on kinesthetic learner that needs to touch or interact with materials to learn, that is pretty easy in the lower grades because you've got a lot of manipulatives with math. But even in the upper grades, a lot of those kids still need some kind of physical model to work with. Even for algebra, there's some really great...
Again, Matthew C. That's one reason I went with Matthew C. is because it fits a variety of modalities and a variety of learning styles. And again, modalities are how you take in the information, and learning styles is another layer.
We're going to talk more about that. I think that graphic organizers are really popular right now, and that is another thing that appeals to those kinesthetic learners. But also the visual learners, because they can see that it's a way to organize the information, and then just the practice of talking about it. So that one hits all three also. Yeah,
I taught my my oldest son to read by taping the alphabet and all. I taped them on the floor with some painter's tape, and he jumped to them and he'd give me the sound, or I'd put the blends, and that's how he learned to read, because he never sat down when he was 6. Never sat down. So I used that to teach him to read.
Well, that's the best thing, is to figure out what makes them tick and then hook that into that, and off you go. And
you wouldn't think, it's really distracting if you think, how's somebody going to learn while they're jumping around? But for some kids, that's exactly what they need to do to learn.
Oh, it is. I have one son that if he was sitting still, stuff was not going in. His ears were not. He had to required so much effort to focus to sit still. So we learned to just let him, wiggle around or move, sit on a ball.
Yeah, my 7-year-old has one of my exercise balls, and he is out around bouncing on that thing all day long while we're doing Bible, while we're doing whatever thing, we're history, and I'll say, now tell me what I read, and he knows.
He knows, yeah.
It's amazing.
If they can tell it back to you, you know they know.
So those were the modalities.
And so there's another layer that's helpful in figuring out your children, and that would be learning styles. And the whole learning style model, I think, comes out of personality models. A lot of people are familiar with 16 personalities or Myers-Briggs and all those things that people who observe people have figured out and categorized over the years. So I like to use the model that I've seen from Kathy Duffy. In the homeschool community, most people are familiar with Kathy Duffy.
Kathy Duffy.
And she has applied those learning styles to homeschool and learning, and given them names that they're much easier to figure out who you're talking about from her names. I think descriptive.
Because if you do that Myers-Briggs thing, there's letters, and I've done mine, but I don't know. I'm like, is it INFT? I can't remember that.
And then there's the other one with the actual spontaneous. Concrete.
Yeah, none of those are really how everyday people think and talk.
No. So we'd like to introduce you to Wiggly Willie, Perfect Paul, Competent Karl, and Sociable Sam.
Or Wiggly Wilma. Perfect Paula, Competent Karl, and Sociable Sue.
Right. Because you get boys and girls doing all these activities, all these kinds of learning styles, the ways they learn. So let's just talk about each one of these in brief, and then after the break, we'll come back and talk about how you can apply it in your homeschool.
Right, and not only to your kids, but to yourself.
Yes, and all the other people you know.
Right, that's true.
It
does help interacting with people when you understand the way they learn and the way they take in information. You can be able to be understood.
Exactly.
Yes.
You can be more understanding. And as this was like light bulbs going off for one of my children in particular, when I could understand that he wasn't just trying to be obnoxious. That was just something he needed to process information in a certain fairly rigid, structured way.
Right.
And after that, it was like, okay, we can do that.
Right.
But first up is Wiggly Willie, or Wilma. And this is your active learner. They love games. They're so full of energy. If you can teach it with a game, they will catch it right away.
Do you know there's a Facebook group called Game Schooling?
I just found out about game
schooling. I
just
got on it too, and it's so fun. So many games I didn't even know were out there.
And that whole idea of teaching through games is
brilliant.
Wonderful. We did that sort of by accident one year with By Jove. By the time we actually sat down and studied Greek history, ancient Greece, they'd already played By Jove so often they already knew.
How fun. Love that.
Big percentage of what we were going to study. But if you have a Wiggly Willie or Wilma, you have a child that needs variety and enjoys change. And so they do easily get bored with the same old thing every single day. And sometimes it can be as easy as just switching up the order in which you do your topics or your subjects. That's enough of a change to keep that kiddo happy. They like competition and challenges. So if you have a contest, like a writing contest, let's say they don't really love writing, but there's a contest.
Oh, right.
Then they can connect. And
my middle daughter, Hannah, is very competitive. And she just called me yesterday and said, guess who's getting the biggest bonus possible this quarter in my company? And I, where her district. And I said, I'm sure it's you. Yeah. Yes, she's very competitive. If there's a goal to meet or a challenge, she is on it. and she will go for it.
And they love that.
Yes.
And that just energizes them. They're really adventurous. They like to take risks. And I have seen that they really are accepting of many types of people. They just are so fascinated with that change, something different. They really do love different kinds of people. The next learning personality, we could call it, is your perfect Paul or Paula. And this is your routine learner. Doesn't really like change, wants their routine and wants to keep it that way. Don't want any monkey wrenches getting thrown into their day. They're practical, responsible, dependable, This is your organizer. These people are naturally organized, and they work systematically, and they thrive in that. So it's almost the opposite of what your Willie or Wilma would want.
Yes.
These are the ones that make lists, and they like to know what's expected, and they want you to do things right.
I see myself a little bit in both of those. Yeah, I like things organized. Nothing bothers me more than disarray. If I walk into a room, like my middle son that lives with us, he's 28 and he works full time. And sometimes I'll walk into his room to leave something like a package, and it just, all I can do not to start tidying up, because I can see if this was done and this was done. Yep.
Not a perfect Paul.
No.
Oh my goodness. I guess if you're a person that does something and then puts it on your list to cross it off, you might be a perfect Paul.
There's something very satisfying about crossing things off a list.
Right. So this is your hardworking, conventional, accurate, consistent, organized person.
Right.
And I have children that are a blend of that, but my perfect Paula was at a very young age making lists of things. And I have a granddaughter who used to make lists of the people as they came in. She would check you in on a list.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Like very, very many of those tendencies.
I recently came across a notebook that I had when I was in high school, and it has a list I wrote for packing to go on a trip to Florida that I took my senior year, and I laughed at myself. I've been doing this list thing forever.
I love lists. There's a lot of that, Paula, in me. But you might also have a child who's a more focused learner, who's competent Karl or Carla. And this is the learning style that was my one son that I had not been able to figure out until I went to a homeschool
convention.
Not a convention, but a local meeting, and we had a speaker.
Right.
And this child or person is logical and analytical and systematic and structured, and likes to solve problems. And I think the catchphrase she said at that meeting was, very happy being serious.
Oh, sure.
And I was like, oh, that's exactly right. Wanted to read science books always checked out books of information at the library. Wanted me to read him a book about lasers for a bedtime story. It's like, okay.
What relaxing reading that must have been. It was,
but research and science likes to solve problems and can maintain focus for a long period of time.
Sure.
But that was so just like a light bulb moment for us. It's
right.
Like, that's why he didn't want to do those fun and game things. Almost the opposite of
So my husband is a competent Karl. We always joke around. We'll say, because my kids and I like to play board games, and my oldest son will come over and he's got an extensive collection. We'll say, do you want to play this game? And my husband will always say no. And the joke in our family is that he hates fun, which isn't true.
No.
Which isn't true at all. But he's not a person. So for bedtime reading, he'll be reading a history book or something.
Yes.
Yeah. And World War II books and things like that.
This child as an adult is very analytical, and it's wonderful. These are the people who can keep all that information.
Oh, yes.
Really
yes. If we need to know something, we might go ask my husband, but we have to tell him, I only want you to answer this question. Please do not give me the whole volume of knowledge you have on this topic, because he knows so much about these things.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they at least for me, our competent Karl loves computers, and I just think that's a good fit for them.
Sure.
They're serious fun, and he has games, but they're pretty technical.
Right.
That he likes.
Yep.
And then we have Sociable Sam or Sue, who's your big picture learner, your global person, your people person. This person is compassionate, they're a good listener, and they're really perceptive of people. They just have a good sense.
They're usually your empathetic people.
Yes, they are.
That's me. I can be near someone And if they're emotional, I will be. They start to cry, I'm crying too, right there with them.
But your Sam or Sue is fascinated by people, want to know more about people. Generally, geography or social studies is one of their favorite topics, and biographies about other people and other lands.
You are speaking to me.
Best way to learn. So you've got these 4 different kinds of learners, and they're just one of the many ways that you can understand your children. But if you know these things about your children, you can modify your curriculum to make learning a more pleasant experience in your home, or to make it more effective, or so that they'll remember and connect with what you're learning.
Yeah, they can interact with the information. That's a great overview of these learning styles. I can't wait till we come back and see how we apply those.
Sounds good. We're going to take a short break to hear a word from our sponsor, and when we return, we'll talk more about learning styles and modalities.
Our podcast today is sponsored by Transcript Maker. It's an online service that allows you to create professional high school transcripts in the comfort of your own home.
I think that no matter what your learning style is, you would love Transcript Maker.
I agree. When I first discovered it, and I, being somewhat sociable and not at all interested in learning Excel, I discovered this program and I couldn't sign up fast enough. It was such a breeze. Taking all those details, what grades, what topics, what courses, and plugging them in, it made it so easy.
It is easy. And that would appeal to your perfect Paula side where you like lists and organization.
Oh, yes. Yes, I really loved printing it out and looking at it. I just can't tell you. I still go back and look at the transcripts I created for my kids that graduated in, 2007, 2008, 2014, whatever. I go back, and that's the thing. Oh, let me say this. So when you make a transcript, it stays on your system, and you can access it even after your subscription is no longer active. You can log in and still print out that transcript. Isn't that lovely?
That's a wonderful benefit.
Yeah, I was thrilled about that.
So even years later?
Yeah, sometimes my oldest son will apply for a new position in his company, and he'll say, "Do you have my transcript?" And I'll say, "Yes, fortunately for you, I do."
Yes, you do.
And I'll just log in and I can print out that transcript.
Oh, it's so important to be able to access it later on in life, because that's the standard when you're applying for a job. They want to see your transcript.
Yes, and I get calls sometimes from people who are looking for their high school transcript, and they don't know how to get it. They'll say their public school has closed, and I think that's amazing. Aren't they supposed to keep that information somewhere so you can have it later? So I love that Transcript Maker keeps it stored on their system so you can access it.
Oh my, that's a wonderful service. You can get a 14-day free trial at www.transcriptmaker.com.
Transcript Maker, simply better transcripts.
Let's get back into our discussion of learning styles and modalities and talk about practical ways that we can apply this in our home.
Sounds good.
Let's start with Wiggly Willie or Wilma. We already talked about what they like: games, activity, action. Who's your action person? They dislike drill, repetition, redoing something once it's done, and detailed records, and basically routines. Routines are boring to this person.
Right.
They need the structure of it, but not in a boring way. And so they're typically strong in things that appeal to that creative, spontaneous side, like music and art and athletics. So these are your performers.
Oh, sure.
And you can pull a lot. You can connect a lot of school subjects to art and music and athletics. And I've found that for my Wiggly, if they could draw a picture of it or create some, artistic, not always a picture, a diorama or a setup or a play. We had them, create a play, and they had so much fun doing that and thought it was really great.
Oh yeah, and that's a really great way for kids to learn. Anyway, if you think back to the things you remember from your childhood, they are the things that involved most of your senses. So for example, when I was in 4th grade, my class did a study on Japan. We painted a mural of a certain mountain in Japan. Mm-hmm. We learned a Japanese dance. We made Japanese food. And I still remember so much of that because it involved my senses. And so senses. That's a great way.
That's a great wiggly. That's great for a wiggly.
Right.
You must have a little bit.
I do. I get bored easily. And I like change. When people complain about things changing, I think, but change is so fun. It's invigorating. Yeah.
And travel.
Mm-hmm.
You like to travel.
I do.
And Wigglies often do. And so those are, aside from a lot of young children having some of those same characteristics, needing to move around and interact with things, these people, even as adults, still have those same characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a tedious type of task, we'll find a way to make it fun.
Oh, yes. Definitely. If I have to do some things that I don't want to do, I'll set a timer or put on music or something to motivate myself.
Make it like compete with the timer, finish before you get it done.
And that can work for your child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They typically do need some help with study habits and self-discipline, because if those things don't seem like fun, like studying for a test, because they have to rehash what they've already learned.
Right.
How boring is that to this person?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to work with them a little bit, find ways to make it a little more interesting, do it with them, talk about your review while you're taking a walk. I mean, there's all kind of ways to make it fun. I like to have fun. So we would make some games to review our topics.
Flashcards wouldn't work for them, but
not very well. Paula or Paul might love flashcards,
but
not your Wiggly. But if you're interacting with them somehow, if you put those flashcards out on the floor and you jump from one to another, or something like that, make it a game.
Mm-hmm.
Or we did a hide and seek thing, where when you found it, then you could answer that question and get points. I think there were points.
Yeah.
There's always points in some kind of game.
Right. Well, they like the competition, so yeah, that's good. So you can take any curriculum that you might have, especially in this time when maybe you weren't planning to homeschool, or this is your first year and you're wondering, oh, did I get the wrong curriculum? Don't worry. You can adapt any curriculum you have to work with any of these learning styles.
Absolutely. Anything can work. You just might have to be a little bit creative with it. And if that's not naturally your strength, ask your friends.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have some good ideas.
Yep. That leads us back to be sure you're in that homeschool support group.
Yes,
where you can ask people questions, and they're more than happy to share their knowledge.
Right, and then there are some Facebook groups I'm finding of new homeschoolers reaching out to people, and I love seeing people connect. Where do you live? Oh, I'm not too far from there. You know, let me help you. Or, what do you need? I'll send it to you. Things like that. But
so Wiggly, we got Wiggly.
Wiggly. Let's talk about Perfect Paul or Paula, which they like to do things as perfectly as they can. I think that's where that tag came from. But they like things to be practical. So they don't like vague instructions and disorganized environment. They don't like to have to work with those abstract ideas or creative assignments. They want to know, what do you want me to do? Right. And then they'll do it.
Yep. I like to write, but I don't write fiction. That's too open-ended, and I can't create characters. I write actual lifestyle and content things. Don't ask me to be creative in that. It doesn't work for me.
No, so for this child, I was very much this child in school, like that assignment to write, pretend you're so-and-so on the wagon trail.
Oh, no. No, that's no fun for me either.
I have no idea what they're going to do. It was much more approachable for me to write about the environment, something factual, or what was it like?
Take information and then write about that information. I could do that.
Yeah, I did not love that assignment, but because I was a perfect Paula, I did it. Right? Do it the right way. What do you want? Okay, that's what I'll do. But it was really hard.
So they don't like creative assignments, disorganized things. What do they like?
They like math and spelling and history and geography, typically. With math, there's only one right answer, and spelling, there's only one right way to write a word. And
I loved spelling.
That appeals to these kids. Very organized. They like just things that are consistent. So this child's going to like having a routine and check off a checklist.
Yep.
One right after the other. What do I do next? They don't want to swap the day around. Like my Wigglies thought that would be great. Let's do the afternoon things in the morning and the morning things in the afternoon, but not my Paulas. They do not want to do that. Sometimes these kiddos need help with creativity because they're so structured, just naturally more rigid. So they need a little bit of help being creative. I guess part of that is just knowing that it's okay to draw outside the lines a little bit.
Right.
And sometimes thinking skills, because they naturally tend to just do what's expected or what's the formula and just do it with the formula.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And as they get older, I know for myself, as I got older, I was more comfortable branching out. But a lot of young kids are very rigid.
A lot of them are. Okay, so we've talked about wigglies and perfects. Let's talk about competent Karl. Competent Karl is so systematic and so analytical, and they like to be thorough. They want to do something really well once.
Yes.
They do not want to have to go and repeat it. They're not comfortable about expressing their emotions typically.
Oh, I know this one. This is not me. I'm not competent Karl, but I have some in my family. And my oldest son is competent Karl.
Okay.
He did not like if I would say, you need to write a paper saying why this thing or that thing is good or bad or defending a position. He didn't want to do that because he said, well, that's just the fact.
Exactly.
End of story. I'm like, oh my gosh, I could not get him to do any really in-depth writing assignments.
Once your competence has figured out something, why would you discuss it? Because we're done with that, you know. Like Mr. Spock on Star Trek, if you're a fan. And they're not always diplomatic about their viewpoint either, because they've already figured it out. And if you know, why would you disagree with them? But we did discover that because people are not logical, sometimes my competent Karl had a little bit of trouble figuring out how to react to people. People are a little bit unpredictable with their emotions, and sometimes these children do not react well. So if you have a really emotional parent, maybe you've lost your self-control for a moment, that child's not going to respond to somebody acting really emotionally off their rocker, basically. They just need some kind of calm and logically presented steps. Right. If they're having trouble. So typically, you know, not surprisingly, they're good at math and science and all those things with details.
Yep, that's what my competent Karl, he loved his math and he loved his science.
And computers.
Yeah, he loves computers.
Typically, at least in our family, our competent Karl and Karla are the ones we ask for help with anything technological. It's like, can you fix it? Or tell me what I'm doing wrong? Or where do I plug this in?
Right.
And they don't even, I mean, it's effortless for them. I can read directions and figure it out, but somehow they just know.
So with these kiddos, they are the kind that you can give them their school books and they can just go do it. My oldest son would take his biology book and he'd go off to his room and get his assignments done with no input at all, really, from me. And then bring it out, and all these answers were written, and I would be like, wow, you know. And then my Wiggly, I had to sit next to them while they did it.
Oh, so maybe they had a little bit of that love language of quality time, where you're sitting there with them.
Well, I think it was just to keep them on task. I think it was just to keep them on task, because it wasn't their strong suit, the science. And you know, writing the answers down was laborious. And so it's just interesting how the different learning styles, how they interact with materials.
That's
because,
true.
you know, they have to, and kind of as an aside, so yes, we want to work with our children's learning styles, but we also need to teach them to understand information given to them in a style other than their preferred style.
Right. I think that's why knowing about learning styles helps us to know where we need to modify. And to teach it, we teach things like if they're struggling in an area, you would teach to their strength. Right. But if they're really confident in an area, then you could teach to their weakness to help them gain more skills.
Yeah, because when they get out of, they get out into the world, into the workplace, into college, no one there is going to change what they do to suit somebody's learning styles or modality.
No, but I do find that if you know that about yourself, you learn how to adapt. And that's the important thing. You need skills. Learn how to adapt.
Definitely.
And so, like for your competent Karl, you work on social skills a little bit and some of that non-technical creativity to help them be able to function in a workplace.
Yes. I remember having to explain to my competent Karls that the accepted social customs mean you look at someone in the eyes when you talk to them,
right,
and you shake their hand. Now I'm having to say, well, you don't necessarily have to shake their hand, but look at people when you talk to them. Yeah.
Right. So you just learn those. And with my middle son, we practiced all those, how do you say hello to someone and offer them a drink of water, or sharing your toys, and you kind of had to rehearse.
Little role playing.
A little bit of role playing before our little friend would come over.
Right.
And, we moms knew that we were giving them the opportunity to practice all those kind of niceties, and they did. They learned.
Yeah.
They do.
They're
smart kiddos. And then you've got Sociable Sam or Sue, who is your big picture person. They don't want all the details. They just want the big picture. And so they don't like having to give exact details. And they don't really like competition in the way that a Wiggly does, because they want everyone to, can we just get along? They like games where you've got, friendly competition, but not something with a mean edge.
I've got a great example of that. So there's a game that we all like to play called Pandemic. I know. I'm sorry. But it's a really fun game. Yes. And one of the reasons I like it, and I do tend to have some sociable qualities, is that it's a cooperative game where you as a team work together to try to defeat the pandemic. So I really like that.
Right. And that kind of game is great.
Yeah.
For a sociable kid.
Right.
They like working together and having a common goal. They don't like conflict, really. So those kind of games are great fun.
Right.
They don't always take criticism well either, because they're so sensitive to, people's feelings, including their own. But they typically are really good with creative writing, because they're all about people. Writing a character. I have a daughter right now who's writing a story. And so she's created these characters, and I don't know how she does that, but they're
I don't either.
Wonderful. Creative writing, literature, love languages, social studies, the performing arts, everything that has to do with people. This is your people person. But because they are those big picture thinkers, and they can get discouraged really easily, you've got to help them develop perseverance and going when it's hard.
Sure.
And also attention to detail, because they're satisfied with the big picture. Details like put your name on your paper. Like, that's not essential in a homeschool until you have several children and their handwriting is similar. Like, whose paper is this? Please put your name on it. But in her world, why would that matter?
Right.
This is my work. Can't you tell it's mine? But those are those sensitive kids that are really flexible in the way that they can approach a situation.
Yeah, they're very forgiving, I think.
Very forgiving, right.
I know, so like we were talking earlier, you can be a combination of these. I'm definitely not competent Karl. But I do see myself in Wiggly and Perfect and Sociable, although if Sociable is doing creative writing, that would throw me out the door. So do you find that people are generally a mixture of these learning styles?
Just from observation of the people I know and the people in my family, I'd say most people are a mixture. However, my competent Karl is pretty much a straight up competent Karl.
I think that particular learning style is very strong. When you're that learning style, it's dominant.
I think so, and part of it has to do with their personality in general, which also, I don't know all of those, like you said before, the IFB and whatever.
Right, yeah.
But there are some subcategories, like some people have taken those 4 models and split them into 16, and you can fine tune some of that and find out a little bit more about what makes somebody tick. But I do have a daughter who has a strong, competent Carla aspect to her, but she's also got a lot of perfect Paula in there. And so there's some complementary aspects there, and then a sociable Sue aspect. And then I have a really Wiggly child who has, we talk about that often, if it's from training that she's so good with checklists and some of those Paula characteristics.
Oh, sure.
Or if it's just because that's part of, who she would have been anyway, but she's definitely a Wiggly.
So the combinations of learning styles, it's fun to see how they work out. And you think that maybe competent and perfect, or you find those together more?
Sometimes, but usually I'm finding, I have seen every kind of mix that, there was one dad who came to some of our meetings who was a sociable Sam and a competent Karl.
Oh, that's interesting.
I was like, how does that work?
Right.
He said, when I'm at work, I'm competent Karl. I think he was an accountant.
Oh, sure.
And when I'm not at work, I'm sociable Sam.
How
He's
fun.
just a charming man. I was like, that's so interesting. I would have thought that might be hard. So after meeting so many different people, I was like, there's all combinations.
Different, yeah.
The takeaway is, let's figure out what makes what works best for my child.
Right.
And see if I can accommodate that in some way. But we do want to be careful about putting people in a box, right, or attaching a label to them and thinking like that's who you are,
right?
Because if they're really young, they're going to be wiggly,
sure,
and hands-on,
sure. And as we mature, like you said, we might take on some characteristics of, we might find that organization really helps us even if we're wiggly. Right. So we can learn to be organized and still be spontaneous.
Right. Or you get someone to help you set up systems that you function really well in. Like I know my Paula oriented, those Paula children that are more organized will go help their sibling who's so wiggly and help them get things set up. And then the wiggly just runs along the tracks that are set up. Just wanted the companionship of figuring it out with someone else, because there's a strong element of sociable in there too.
Sure.
But it's fun to watch people grow and change and mature, and I think that we can be balanced as people.
Yes.
If we know we tend to be one way, just to take a look and see if maybe I need to learn some other.
Right. I would have loved to have known some of these things about myself. Maybe when I was in my late teens or in my early 20s when I started having my kids. And it just took a while. And, I figured it out. Okay, I like this. I don't like that. But it sure is nice to have some of these things laid out where you can kind of evaluate yourself and evaluate your kids. And it's good to help your kids to understand these. I remember teaching my kids a little bit like, this is what this is, and this might be why you do these things. And, it just helps us to understand ourselves. And when we're choosing curriculum, if we're wiggly or perfect or competent or sociable, the curriculum we choose that we have to use to teach our children, it's really important. Because we do want a curriculum that kind of speaks to our kids. But if it's one that we can't access because of our own learning styles, it's going to be really tough.
It is tough. And in the beginning, we tend to choose something that we like. Right. And then we find ways to make it work. Like you said earlier, anything will work. But I think over time we found ways we did a lot with unit studies, which, because I have a wiggly element there, that was so great. We could change things up and figured out that how to have change within a routine, because there's also that need for me at least to be, organized and have my lists and know what's coming up next. But we found the activities or the learning activities and assignments I gave the children, I could modify them. Just so that they could, because I wanted them to enjoy learning. Right.
Yes. And that's the thing is, the goal of homeschooling is to create a lifestyle of learning and make learning interesting and accessible. So if you're trying to take somebody and stick them at a desk and make them drill and kill, they would say all that. That's not what we're trying to do here.
No,
the less it looks like school, really, the better, I think.
Well,
especially
it just becomes
when your
part
kids
of your
are young.
Life. Learning, your life is a lifestyle of learning. And it's home-centered, and then from there you're teaching them all the skills they need to learn the things that might not be in the curriculum. Right. And we just had a lot of fun. But I helped the children understand those personalities. Like, that's why you love filling out the worksheets, and they hate filling out the worksheets, and then figure out another way to review the information. You don't have to do pages and pages of worksheets if there's another way that you can get the information.
And then if your kid loves worksheets,
it's
fine to have them.
I was that kid. Just give me a workbook, I'll fill it all out. Yeah, and so that wasn't going to work with my wiggly, and I had to branch out.
Right. Well, I think that this information is going to really help people as they move forward through this school year.
I think so. If you find something's not working, adjust it a little bit.
Yep.
That's a really brief look at learning styles and modalities. We'd love to hear how learning styles have been helpful in your homeschool. At this time in our podcast, we usually answer some questions. Holly, do we have a question?
We do. Lisa M. writes in, I'm homeschooling my 6-year-old, and I also have a toddler. They both often need me at the same time. How do I balance my responsibilities as a teacher with my responsibilities as a parent?
Oh, that happens a lot. That was our experience when we first started homeschooling. I had a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a newborn.
Oh, goodness. I had a 2nd grader, a kindergartner, a 3-year-old, an 18-month-old, and then I was newly pregnant.
Oh, my. Oh, wow.
A lot of juggling that first year.
And that's the answer, a lot of juggling. You figure out what needs to be done one-on-one with your 6-year-old. I used nap time for the toddler to do a lot of those one-on-one things with the 6-year-old for phonics and math. And their lessons are short when they're that young.
Right. It shouldn't take you more than an hour or two to get through whatever you want to teach them that day.
That's right, but we did. When the toddler was down for a nap, we did the one-on-one things. And then when the toddler was awake, we included that child. And they were just as much a part of school as the other one because I didn't want to be pushing them off to the side.
Right. Yes, I think that's the key. I kept some little activities on hand for my toddler to do while I was working with the older children. And also at the beginning of the day, what I did was I gave the older children some independent work. Even a 6-year-old can maybe copy a row of A's on a paper, or they can play with counting blocks or something while you do something with the little kid. Because if you get the little kid and you spend some focused time with them, and then you sit them down at your feet with some little toys, they're very happy because you filled their cup first.
And I think that's just a good tip overall. We started with the youngest first. I worked youngest to oldest. The older ones could keep themselves busy with either school assignments or some household chores, like emptying the waste baskets or feeding the pets. They were doing things while I worked with the younger one first. And like you said, then they were happy and satisfied. And we also did some assignments for the toddlers, but they were things like go play with the blocks.
Right.
Or now it's time to go, play with the cars and trucks or the play kitchen or things like that. And we did the same thing. I had some school time only toys. So they were really unique things that they couldn't get. It keeps their interest longer.
Another thing I would suggest is to have planned snack times.
Oh, absolutely.
So we had, I think 10 or 10:30, we took a break and all the kids had a snack. And the little toddler, what I did with my toddlers is I created a little preschool. I'm putting quotation marks on that, little preschool. But we did some little activities for them, like I would read them a book, or we would learn a poem, or we would do some little finger plays, or little kind of activities that were focused, counting, jumping, whatever, and then we'd have our snack. And everybody wanted a snack. I learned that real quickly. Even the older students wanted to have the snack.
Of course.
And that just helps because when little people get hungry, they're just really unpleasant. And it's hard to get through anything. Even for me as an adult, if I get really hungry, I really can't focus on anything.
You can't be your best self.
So feed them, take breaks, go outside.
Go outside, I was going to say. You let everybody go outside and take a break and play and use those big motor muscles that you can't run and jump in the house. You need they still need that, and it's important for development for the little
And if you
ones.
have a read aloud, you can take your book outside and read.
You can.
So it's a really short time when that little 2-year-old is going to be kind of an interruption. They're not an interruption, but if you're trying to do certain things and they're climbing on the top of the table, that might be hard. So feed them. Give them attention first, and do some stuff when they're napping. Hopefully they take naps. I had a couple 2-year-olds that didn't really nap. But
they still had, at least in my house, they might not sleep, but they had to rest or have a quiet time.
Yes, exactly.
But it is challenging
to
figure all of that out. And so some of that is just you kind of figure it out as you go.
Yep. Try some things, and if they don't work, throw them out and try something else. I have a really great tip. So one of the things that my little kids did, they loved doing, is I put a tablecloth on the floor, one of those wipeable tablecloths, and I would give them some paintbrushes and the little papers that already have the paint in them. And they felt like they were painting. So I would say, it's your art time, and they would sit there in their little diapers or whatever on the tablecloth painting. Or I'd give them a paintbrush with water, and we would sit out back, and they would paint the house while I did some reading with the older child. So there's all kinds of creative ways. And if you do a search on things to do with toddlers while you're homeschooling, a lot of people have put those things down, and you'll be amazed at all the brilliant ideas that moms will give you.
Figure things out. Yeah. Figuring out while you're doing your children.
Yeah, but you can do it, and it just might mean you do things in little bits and pieces here and there. That's okay. Your 6-year-old doesn't need to sit down for a really long time to do schoolwork anyway.
I had short lessons for short people.
Right? I like that. And I'm still a short person. So short lessons still work for me.
They do. They keep their attention, and you can get a lot accomplished, and then you can do something with your toddler.
Exactly.
But it's going to be, she'll figure it out.
Right. Yep. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you and help you with your homeschooling questions. Please send them to us on Twitter at _homeschoolpod.
Or email us at happyhomeschoolpod@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Melody.
I'm Holly. Happy homeschooling.
Hi, this is your host, Melody Gillum. Thank you for listening to the Happy Homeschooler Podcast, a Transcript Maker Production. My co-host is Holly Williams Urbach. This episode was produced by Matthew Bass and edited by Norah Williams. Our graphic design is by Pete Soloway, and our music is by the Great Pangolin. You can find her music on YouTube and Twitter at Kylie Wins. That's Kailey Wins. If you'd like to help our podcast grow, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. Or, as always, tell people about us. You can get a free 14-day.
You can.